All right. Hello, everyone. It is so wonderful to be here today with these two amazing authors. And I wanted to start with a little audience check just to see who we had in the room. So could I get you to raise your hand if you identify as a book lover? Awesome. Great. Students or young people, can we see hands for students and young people? Awesome. You're the best. Parents, family members, educators,
Woohoo!
fantasy fans, awesome.
Yay.
Aspiring writers,
Yes.
Awesome. So we have a wonderful group with us here today, and I'm excited to kick things off with y'all. And I was wondering if you could start by giving us a little rapid fire book talk, just to tell us what these titles are about. And I can start with you, Jen.
Sure. So The Daggers of Ire is a new series for me, coming off of The Stormrunner, and then I had done some companion novels off of that. So it's really exciting to delve into a new world. And it's basically a new mythology of the night that magic was born. And it takes us on a Latinay adventure of a young witch who does not understand her powers and who has to work with her friends, who is a shape-shifting Brujo himself. And they go on a long adventure to try and save the witches of their town, and they end up in a very scary place that is supposedly a prison for witches that do not behave well.
Ooh, amazing.
Well, I love witches. Don't you love witches?
And dragons.
Yes, and witches have been so misunderstood and misrepresented, so hey. All right, Dragons in a Bag is a 5-book series, and The War of the Witches is book 5. So in a nutshell, there's a boy named Jax, and he decides to become apprentice to an elderly witch named Ma. This is in Brooklyn. Ma is on the brink of retirement, and she gets one last job to send 3 baby dragons to the realm of magic. Jax is meant to help her. He gets 2 of the dragons there, but there's a dragon thief, so then they have to find the 3rd dragon, and then Jax finds out he is not destined to be a witch's apprentice. He is ambassador to the realm of magic. To get to the realm of magic, he has to cross the enchanted bridge. He persuades the guardian of the realm of magic to open the doors. I'm an immigrant. I write a lot about community and belonging. Jax and his child friends believe that magic should be integrated into our world. The elders in the book disagree and think unicorns, etc., are not safe in the human realm. So there's an ongoing debate about whether the doors should be opened or closed. Jax makes an argument, open all the doors, and that's what happens. And then a scourge emerges that saps all the magical energy from creatures and turns them to stone. And he thinks, well, this is my fault. I opened the doors and look what happened. But he believes there's a path to peace. And again, the elders think, no, we must go to war, the war of the witches. And I can't tell you how the book ends, but I can say that I had some disappointed readers who were like, when's the next book coming out? And then somebody said, how come Ma is so mean? And I just thought, she's not mean. She's tired, right? Like she's been doing this for 100 years. But children, of course, they don't know what retirement is, right? So I just wrote the prequel, The Oracle's Door, which comes out next month. And that is Ma as a 9-year-old girl in Chicago in 1919, discovering the realm of magic for the very first time.
It's fun.
Fantasy writers are the best. That was really cool. I would love to think about, Samira Ahmed is a writer an educator that I really admire, and I once heard her say that all books answer a question. And I'm wondering if you're thinking about your books, what question do you think your books seek to answer? Could be multiple questions.
Do you want to go first?
Sure. As I said, I'm an immigrant. You've probably heard my accent already. I'm Canadian. Look for that oot and a boot. And so I think I'm always interested in how we create a world, a community, where everyone feels they can belong. And I had a young woman come up to me after one of my presentations years ago because I start every presentation by saying I'm an immigrant. And she came up and she said, I don't like that word. I said, what word? She said, immigrant. And I just thought, when did immigrant become a dirty word? Like, you have no reason to be ashamed about that. Everyone has a contribution to make. Everyone has a role within their community. I think young people especially are desperate to contribute, to be acknowledged for what they have to offer instead of being spoken over or spoken about. So my books, I think, are really asking, how do we build a community where people who are different are treated equally, are treated valuably, and are given an opportunity to contribute? How do we make that world? Obviously, I'm writing about how do we include phoenixes and dragons and unicorns, but really I'm saying, how do we accept and acknowledge and appreciate difference?
So when I was growing up, I was obsessed with magic, and I was coming into learning the power structures of our world. And so I think that I like this question a lot because I write to understand the world, myself, and it gives me an opportunity to put something down on the page. And so for me, it's always been, does magic exist? What exists beyond what our eyes can see and what we can hear? Because we're so limited in our own senses, right? I went to the Museum of Natural History yesterday, and I watched a couple in the IMAX theater on the cosmos. And you realize how small we all really are when you're in that theater and you see the way the universe is functioning and how little our knowledge is of that. And so I think that for me, I'm always writing about magic, whether it's adult books, young adult, middle grade. And I think that I'm trying to reach for something beyond this human experience that tells me, yes, there is something beyond what we have right here on this planet Earth. And I really want magic to be real.
It is.
I think that sort of brings to mind for me, one of the things I love about fantasy books for young people is even though they take place in these magical realms or there are these magical things happening, they open up conversations with young people about things that are happening in our world as well. And they make those topics, I think, feel less scary to discuss. So whether that is like systems of power or structures and hierarchies, or how race plays into things, or how differences or belonging plays into things. And you just spoke to that a little, Zetta, but are there any other topics that you hope your books bring to light, or are there any conversations you hope that young people and the older people in their life will start to have after reading these titles specifically?
You know, for me, I would like to tell you that I sit down and I think about theme and what I want my books to say and what I want readers to get from them, but I don't. I'm just a storyteller, and I need, again, to understand the world. And for me, it's just this process of getting it down on the page, and there's really no ulterior motive. But I think that if there were a conversation I would hope for around any of my books, it would be about the structures of power, who maintains power, how do you access power, and why are those systems in place? And whether we're talking about, a talking fox in an enchanted coat, or we're talking about a young witch, or any of that. And I think so often we are raised in environments where the adults know everything, right? And that's why I love middle grade so much, because it's the kids who are saving the world, and they're the ones who are saying, no, we're gonna take back our own power, and now we have to go save the adults. And so I think if there were anything that it would be an interesting discussion, I should say, would be around systems of power.
Absolutely. Whenever people ask me why I write about magic, I say because magic is power.
It is.
Right? Mm-hmm. And you can't just hand power to anyone, but especially a child, and expect them to know how to wield it responsibly. So that's something that I'm interested in. I write historical fantasy because I love history. And when I interact with young people and I ask them if they love history, they usually either yawn or roll their eyes. And that's largely because of how history is taught, right? And so it's taught usually that we have these incredible, remarkable, exemplary men, and they come onto the scene and transform the world for everybody. And that's what leadership is, and that is so not how history is made. So I'm really interested in talking about communities. And so I write about the Black Lives Matter movement, and I write about segregation, because when I have African American characters talking about whether or not magic should be integrated into their world, well, we have some experience with segregation. We know what that does. We know what the effects are. Jax, my main character, his father was killed in a car accident. He has a lot of questions around what's fair and what's not. And sometimes you have to accept things that are unfair and difficult and painful. They happen. But then what do you do next? Right? Ma keeps asking Jax, why are you so desperate to be a witch, right? Why do you want to do this? And I think I'm writing largely sort of against the conventions of the books I read as a child, right? I don't want a bunch of witches and wizards in a castle in England somewhere studying by themselves, just entertaining each other. Like, I met a witch and she lives in Chicago now, Lakeisha Harris, and I said, what do Black witches do? And she was like, they serve the community. So witches have to be visible, they have to be active, they have to be engaged, they have to be asking what their community needs. I think that's a different kind of leadership, right? And I want young people to understand that. I heard Angela Davis, I met her once, she was giving a talk, and she said her parents prepared her to live in a world that didn't yet exist. And I just think that's the miracle of not just African American parents. So many of us are trying to raise children, trying to raise a new generation with the tools they'll need to shape a better future. And I think books can be that tool if it's not about how to escape your reality, but how to engage with it more deeply.
Super powerful. I really love in your series how you dive into so many different pockets of history, whether it's like Chicago or Brooklyn or the city people, or like you just weave so many cool, like I learned so much as an adult reader. I loved that.
Thank you.
I think both of y'all brought up sort of adults in the world of these middle grade fantasy books. And so I have it's kind of a long question, but I think both Jax and Esme have to do a lot of perspective taking, and they're both very thoughtful main characters that are trying to understand like what adults are doing around them. And they spend a lot of time figuring out who's trustworthy and who's not. And even I, as a reader, was like, had a lot of like, I was like, oh, do we trust this person? I don't know. So I'm sort of wondering, for Esme, it's, you know, her mom who has recently passed, her dad, the witches, Fetch. And then in Dragons, it's like so many adults. There's Ma, there's the Coven members, Sis, Vaughn, the Scourge, even Blue. And you both write these older characters in really nuanced ways. And I feel like a lot of fantasy I read growing up was like, there's this guide who like maybe is a little too hands-off, but like you can probably trust them. And then there's like this really bad guy lurking in the shadows. And there wasn't quite so much nuance. And y'all make Jax and Esme sort of shove truth in their faces, be a little bit of a thorn in the sides of all these very complex adults. And so I'm sort of wondering like how you go about writing those sorts of characters, and can you speak to why exploring these nuanced, layered, you know, flawed adults in their lives, why was that so important in your stories?
For me, I love flawed characters. I love to write villains. They're my absolute favorite. And I think everyone is flawed. And I think people who try to appear like they're not are dangerous people. Mm-hmm. And so authenticity is really important to me in the relationships I have in my own life, whether those are business relationships or personal relationships. And so I don't think it's challenging to write flawed adults. I think that there is some complexity to it because you want them to fit like a puzzle piece into the story really well, and you want it to be a natural fit. I think that we can all tell when we're reading certain stories that when certain characters just feel like, gosh, did they just get thrown onto the page? You know, they're not kind of like melding into the narrative itself. And so writing the adult characters is a little bit challenging too, just because I like writing kids. And I think that many of the adults are usually can be antagonists, they're standing in the way. I generally don't love the adults to be guides in any way. And I like to lead the reader into a zone where they're like, oh, I can trust JC. And then we turn a screw and all of a sudden it's like, oh, maybe I can't trust that person. And I thought that was a good character and maybe they're not. And so I think that it's a reflection of what life is really like, right? So we have the people in our lives that they present a certain face to us and they're managing their image. And then it takes so much of our own intuition to kind of see behind the scenes. And so I think that's what I'm always trying to get at with the characters in my book. And it's not always the easiest thing.
That's a really good point, because I think one of the ways we learn to trust ourselves is being able to figure out who to trust around us. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm drawn to middle grade because I quite often always write about kids who are 8 or 9 or 10, because that was a really pivotal moment in my life. My family sort of disintegrated when I was around 7, and then my parents divorced when I was 8, and then I moved to a new school. Both my parents are school teachers, and I skipped a grade when I was young, and I was sort of always teacher's pet, and my mom taught at my school. She was my kindergarten teacher, so I kind of had this like mini school paradise, and then everything changed, and I went to a new school, and I was one of maybe 3 black students at the whole school. Everybody else was white. I was not put in the gifted and talented program. That was the first time I had a teacher tell me I had a bad attitude. I was definitely not the teacher's pet. We didn't have auditions for the school play, which was standard practice where I came from. So I was like, how come blonde-haired, blue-eyed gets to be the lead? I would like to audition because I think I sing better. Like there were all these, and then all of a sudden it's like, you're a troublemaker just because you're trying to speak up for yourself, for your rights. And I couldn't go home and ask my parents to back me. My parents were teachers, and they always backed the teachers. But I had grandparents. And I write about elders a lot. Kids always say, is your grandma like Ma? And I'm like, no, she is not. A, neither of my grandmothers would ever curse. And B, they don't drink root beer. And you know, there are all kinds of differences. They don't hit people with their canes. There are all kinds of differences, but it's always important to me to have intergenerational conversations and relationships in my books. And I feel like I replicate my own family situation. So I have kids who can't trust their parents, but who trust their grandparents. They trust the elders in their lives. So Jack doesn't even know he has a grandfather, and suddenly he enters the realm of magic, and there's his grandpa. And then, right? And then he's like, Mama, how come you didn't tell me about, and she's like, because he's into that magic stuff. So then it turns out his mother was an apprentice once upon a time and couldn't handle it. So then he has to have that conversation with her. And she's so afraid for him to be dabbling in this world with power, that he might think he'll have more power than he actually will, that it will take him away from her. So I think writing complicated characters is easy for me because I did feel sometimes betrayed by the adults in my life, abandoned by those adults. And then there was always someone, and frankly, it was often a teacher, right? It was that English teacher who said, you're gonna be a writer. It was that librarian who said, I know you like Frances Hodgson Burnett, but maybe you'd like to try this book by Virginia Hamilton. Like, there have been so many people who just had pivotal moments to say, this is where you could go next, and I try to reproduce that in my books.
I love that, because I just think in both of your books and the books I have read by you before, I just feel like you keep it very real with kids, which is, I think, the most important thing we can do in work for young people.
Well, and parents are problematic, right? They're very problematic.
Yes, they
I want
are.
them off the page. And I'm like, I can't keep killing everybody's parents.
At least once.
Yeah, but they're very, I really don't like parents.
I love it. I want to allow some time for questions, so I'm going to ask one last quick question, and I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say this, but if people are feeling like they would like to ask one of our authors a question, now would be a good time to start probably moving maybe to the mics. I think that's what we are doing. But my last question is, it is back to school time. I know DC Public Schools goes back on Monday, and some students are already back in school. So a lot of kids are feeling a range of emotions right now. And I am wondering, what do you think is one piece of advice that your main characters would offer to students as they begin the quest of the new school year?
Do you want to go?
Sure. I think Jax would say, shine for yourself. Don't feel like you have to shine for other people, because there are other people who will never see your shine. Shine for yourself.
That's good. I think Esme would say find that one, not just friend, but that one person who will stick by your side, who will see you for who you truly are, who will love you, who will love your flaws, and who will be your ride or die, the way Tiago is for her. Like, yes, I will go on that death-defying quest with you.
Jax has Vic too, so like y'all write good sidekicks too. Like
The sidekicks are the
Friends.
friends.
What would you do without your friends?
I love it. Well, I want to make sure we have some time for questions, so I see somebody at the mic. Go for it.
Hi, thank you so much for your amazing books that you write. Being able to see myself and other kids that look just like me, able to see themselves in the books and actually get to think that they can be magical too is something that is absolutely amazing. My question is kind of in relation to that. When writing about your cultures, other cultures, and blending that into fantasy realms, how do you pick apart and decide what truths of the real world do you keep the same, and what do you adapt to fit in your story?
So I grew up in an oral storytelling tradition. My grandmother was always telling me stories of magic and the Mesoamerican gods. And I think that for me, it feels like a very natural kind of transition, and one that I don't necessarily stop and think about. And I like to break all the rules of our world. And it's interesting because I really like more portal fantasy than I do high fantasy, because I do like to kind of cherry pick, like, you know, this from our world and that from our world. But I think coming again back to that oral storytelling tradition, I will often sit back and think, well, how would my grandmother tell this? What would she say?
I love that.
That's awesome. So my grandmother was a preacher in the Pilgrim Holiness Church, which was fundamentalist, girls can't wear pants, no secular music, that kind of thing. And my aunt thinks Harry Potter is satanic. So there weren't a whole lot of conversations about magic that I could have with my family. You know, the advice I got from my mother was stay away from Ouija boards. And I was like, what's a Ouija? Like, they weren't lying around, so, but you weren't allowed to check your horoscope. Like, there were so many, you know, just conservative beliefs that when I started looking for magic beyond the British fantasy fiction that I had read, which was elitist and imperialist and racist and sexist and classist and on and on and on, I didn't know where to go, right? My father's family is Caribbean, so I tried to talk to folks about Obeah, and most people didn't want to talk about that because they considered it black magic. And then if I looked to African magical practices, rituals, you know, there's the rupture of the Middle Passage that makes it hard for me to go back and find that and have it feel natural. So then what I'm left with, the best option for me is something hybrid. So let me pull what I can find from the distant past, and then let me blend it with what I'm already an expert on, which is urban life in the United States. So I know Brooklyn like the back of my hand. I lived there 20 years. And then I moved to Chicago, so I brought my series with me to Chicago. And I just walk around my neighborhood. I want kids to read a book and look at their neighborhood differently, because it's just what you said. Magic can happen to anyone, anywhere.
Yep.
Magic is for everyone. It is not only for white kids in castles in England, right? And a witch is not necessarily a woman with green skin and a hooked nose and a pointy hat on a broom with a black cat. I'm working on a book right now, The Witch of the Woods, and it's just so empowering to craft a witch in my own image, so to speak, right? She's Afrofuturistic, she has tattoos, she started a seed bank in an underground sewer. I can do whatever I want. It's extremely empowering. But there is always that memory of the rupture, of the fact that my family was so thoroughly colonized, they couldn't see the beauty and the richness and the power of our own magical practices.
Well, from one bruja to another.
Thank you.
We have about 5 minutes left, just so we know, but turn it over to the next question. I see a young person over here.
Okay, this is for JC Cervantes. I just finished reading that book, and it is amazing.
Thank you.
Where are you? Is that from mythology or something? Like, what kind of mythology is that from?
Which book did you read? The Daggers of Ire?
Yep.
Oh my gosh, you're my first reader. Thank you. Hail.
Oh wow.
That's such a good question, and the reason is because I had spent 5 or 6 books exploring the mythology of Mesoamerica, so Aztec and Mayan, and going back to what Zeta was talking about, same, colonization, lots of records destroyed by the Spanish invasion. And so I really started thinking about what would a new mythology look like? What would a mythology look like that was born one night because of 4 sisters' love? And how would that be different from the ethnocentric that we've all been inundated with? And so I made up the mythology. I just decided I wanted to make something up.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
This is for JD, and I'll be quick. JD, I know you'll be signing books, and your time is valuable, so I made sure to buy your book, but I'm hoping that you'll be willing to sign this book instead, because it's not often that I get a chance to get a copy of Don Quixote autographed by a Cervantes.
My husband will love the story. He's over at the Library of Congress today, and there's a Cervantes engraved, and he says, "Look, you're repping the whole." I'm like, "Yep, that's me."
All right, we got 2 minutes left. Go for it. Let's try to get through 2 more.
First of all, Stormrunner is a really good book, and second of all, do any of you guys have any advice for young authors writing a fiction book?
So you may not like this, but in order to be a really good writer, you have to be a really good reader. You have to read, read, read. You have to feed your imagination, and that means stories of all kinds. Go to lots of art exhibits, go to museums. I watch a television show, and then I watch it again, and then I watch it again. I watch movies sometimes 4 times, because the first time you just want to see what happens, but the second, third, and fourth time you can study how the story is being laid out, how it's being told. So when you read and read and read and feed your imagination, your mind is like a sponge. Soak up as much information as you can, and then when you wring it out, you're writing. Have a writing practice. Try to write for at least 15 minutes a day. It can be anything. It can be what you see out your window. It can be what you had, what you ate, what you did today. Just try to get into the habit of writing something every single day.
I have a quick question for you. Do you write?
Yes.
Do you want to be a writer?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what I will tell you. People have all kinds of advice. Don't listen to any of us, actually. Really, truly unleash your imagination. I think that as we get older and older and older, I never stopped believing in magic, and I never stopped reading children's literature, and I never, ever stopped being in awe of our world. So keep that, and don't let adults mess that up for you.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, we have a wrap it up sign, so is it super quick? Or do you want to ask in the signing line? Why don't
No, go ahead and ask.
Ask really quickly, and we'll try to answer it quickly.
So my question was, like, you both mentioned, like, you draw a lot of inspiration from, like, your own, like, cultural history and, like, mythos. And, like, one thing I've noticed in my journey is, like, when, like, trying to, like, get in touch with my own culture is, like, much of it has been like really eroded or corrupted by colonization, and it's made it like incredibly difficult to figure out like what's true, what's false. Like, how were you able to like find the mythology you wanted to use?
So I'll be super fast. I did a ton of research, so not only from my own family, but reading firsthand accounts, talking to people from specific regions in the world, watching documentaries, and then a lot of the rest of it, I had to piece together because so much was lost, and which is heartbreaking. But don't be afraid to take what's missing and fill it in with your own heart and your own soul and your own imagination.
Absolutely. The thing about writing historical fiction or historical fantasy is you only use 10 to 15% of your research anyways, right? The most important thing you're doing is telling a good, compelling, engaging story. Start there. Start with the story you want to tell, and then you can, cherry pick those historical facts you can find and weave them into the story.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure to share
Thank you.
Thank you.